I've been pondering this question. What is the difference between existing and living? What is, this is going to sound cliched. What is the meaning of life? Now be careful. It's an amazing thing many of us suffer from, that we somehow believe that we know the answer to those questions just right off the bat. But I'm becoming more and more convinced as I approach retirement age. I'll have to work 2 years after my funeral. I'm becoming convinced that that is a mistake. To answer that question too quickly, what's the difference between mere existing and really living? I'm convinced that we should spend some more time considering that, especially in light of our gospel lesson, our epistle lesson, and the story of the lady that we are remembering today. Mary, the Egyptian woman, who only took the Eucharist once in her entire life. Amazing that we know of. This is a woman who lived her life from the age of 12 in the most degenerate and self-serving and self-centered and narcissistic way. This woman indulged every one of her passions to the nth degree. She really, really worked hard at pleasing herself and living her life in such a way that you would not want anybody respectable to ever come around her, because she was a woman of ill repute to the nth degree. In fact, she left Egypt and went, she was in the Palestine area, and she took a boat ride to Jerusalem so that she could see where all the pilgrims were going for Pascha. Since we're getting close to Pascha, this is an appropriate time for us to remember her. And when she got off the boat, she followed the pilgrims to the church of the Holy Sepulchre. And as she was trying to go inside, it felt like a hand was put in front of her, and she couldn't go in. And she noticed everybody else was going in, no problem. But every time she tried to take a step into the church, she was stopped. And as she looked into the church, she saw the icon of Mary, the Theotokos, and Christ there within her. And suddenly it struck her that the reason why she was not allowed to come into the church was because of the way she had lived her life. And she looked at Mary, the icon of Mary, and said, "Mother Mary, if you will allow me to enter the church and venerate the gospel, I will spend the rest of my life repenting of my actions." And immediately she could enter the church. She venerated the gospel and left the church and went into the Egyptian desert. And there she lived for decades, praying for every person she had ever led astray by her bad living. The story goes on that a certain priest by the name of Zosimus, was going through the desert, and he came across this figure in the daytime. Now listen, you're just going to have to trust me here, okay? Zosimus reported that this figure was floating off the ground. Since that's not something you see a lot, no matter what the story about Ali Baba and the 40 thieves and the flying carpets say, that's an interesting thing. So he went and looked further, and it was a woman, and she noticed that the priest Zosimus was there, and she came over to him and was separate. They were separated by the river, and she said to Father Zosimus, St. Zosimus. She said, "Oh, Father Zosimus." They'd never been introduced. "Father Zosimus, may I have your blessing?" He said, "Well, of course, daughter, you can have my blessing. Let me go around and find a place I can cross the river, and I'll come to you and give you a blessing." She said, "Oh, no, Father, you're the priest. I'll just come to you." And she walked across the river and came to him. And when she came to him, he gave her a blessing, and she said, "Father, may I have the Eucharist?" And she told him her story, and of course he gave her the Eucharist, and she said, "Next year when you come by this way again, would you bring me the Eucharist again?" And Father Zosimus said, "Yes, of course." And by the time she came back, by the time he came back, Mary had died. And he found Mary's body and a little note that said, "Dear Father Zosimus, the old Mary has died. Would you please put her in the ground?" Why do we remember that story? Why do we hear this gospel lesson and this epistle lesson as we approach Friday? It starts. It's the canon of Lazarus is Friday night. Saturday morning is Lazarus Saturday, and then Sunday morning's Palm Sunday, and Katie bar the door. Here we go. Why now? Why do we hear her story? Because, brothers and sisters, we're approaching the pinnacle of the church year. We're approaching that moment when the entire universe forever and ever and ever is going to be completely transformed and changed, no matter how many times people try to say we're going to go back to the way it was before Jesus, we're going to pretend Jesus never existed, blah, 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 and yet they say this is the year 2024. Anno Domini. The fact of the matter is, we are approaching the moment in the history of the human race where the answer to the question, what is the difference between existence and living, really about? The true purpose of living, ladies and gentlemen, according to normal Christianity, is to do two things. First, finally, be honest with yourself. And secondly, understand you were made to be the companion of God. You weren't made to suffer and die. You weren't made to struggle with your passions. You weren't made to be gripped by addictions. You weren't made to be filled with anger or fear or all kinds of envy or constantly comparing yourself to others. You weren't made for that. You are made to be the companion of God and finally be honest with yourself about your desperate, complete, utterly necessary need for Jesus Christ in your life. And the fact that you are continuing to be blind to that truth is the continued symptom of the illness of the human race that we all share together. And so the church, in her love for us, gives us the story of St. Mary of Egypt, to wake us up to the true meaning of life. The true meaning of life is to finally be honest with yourself and know you were made to be the companion of the uncreated God. So what does God do for you? God goes into every place, every low place in creation that has been gripped by darkness and the evil one and the passions and constantly gripped by the addictions of the world and the sin of the world and the self-centeredness of our lives and the narcissistic attitude of our actions. All the while excusing ourselves by saying, well, I'm not as bad as that person. Continuing to be blind to our desperate need for Christ, God goes into every dark place and finally even entering into death itself and destroying death from the inside out, rising from the dead, ascending to the right hand of God the Father, and then beckoning you and me, now, all of you, come up here and be with me. It will take a change in your life, folks. That change will begin by the way you reorient your priorities. by putting the most important thing at the top of your priorities and allowing the rest of your life to find its proper place through your honest confession and assessment of your true self. Escaping the delusions of your excuses and your blindness, and asking God to give you mercy and give you help. This morning, as we approach that week that we call holy, let us be men and women of courage and maturity, of humility and honesty. And let us embrace the glorious good news that Jesus Christ has conquered death and everything that smells like death for you, because you were made to be God's eternal companion. Amen. Thank you so much for watching. I pray this was a blessing to you. If it is a blessing to you, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share these videos. It really does help us a great deal. Speaking of helping us, if you'd like to support this media outreach, go to our Patreon site at Faith Encouraged on patreon.com. You can also visit us at our website at faithencouraged.org and write me at frbarnabas@faithencouraged.org. I look forward to seeing you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. God bless you.